Go. Okay, my third grade kids, how are you today? Okay, today is Wednesday, the belly button of the week, May 27. Some of you did very well in the exam, some others so-so, but if you are uh, doing the tutorials, following them, and sending me the work, I will consider it, and I can give you a point, an extra point if you write present. So please help yourself. Today we're going to see vocabulary and listening, okay? And we are going to talk about race relationship. Remember, well, in all the world, we are different races. But the one that was most discriminated in USA are the Negroes. Well, that is not good to say. The black people, okay? Then the Latins, and then the Chinese. Okay? Let's look at it. Open your student's book on page 112, okay? Here you can see different pictures of different people, okay? You can see an African American museum, and the first thing that you are going to see, okay, is complete the text with the words in the box. Here you have different words like attractions, billboard, eateries, expedition, guide, interstate, landmarks, road trip, box lunches, vacation, rentals, okay? And well, you can look at the pictures here. Okay, here is the African American Museum, and you have to complete it with these words, okay? African American Museum. The Freedom Riders on May 4, 1961, a group of young black and white Americans, the Freedom Riders, left Washington, D.C. on and you look for this, I will say road trip, okay? With a difference. The Freedom Riders rode 2 tour buses on the, and then you go here, interstate that headed south. But they weren't going on a trip to visit tourist attraction or historical landmarks. Okay, in 1960, the Supreme Court had ruled that African American had the right to use the same transportation facilities as white Americans. However, in some eateries is the place where you have lunch. Some eateries at bus and train station and at vacation rentals and motels, black travelers still found signs that says whites only. There were also racist billboards outside some towns warning African American to leave before dark. Do you know that the last president Obama was African American? Unbelievable, right? Because this situation, there was a special guide for African American travelers to help them to find friendly accommodation. The Freedom Riders expedition to the south ended in violent attacks on the young black and white travelers that were seen on TV all around the world. However, the U.S. government acted, and instead of preparing box lunches for their trips, African Americans were soon eating in roadside restaurants alongside all other Americans. This is one step for freedom. Okay? Now, you are going to listen to the museum audio guide and look at the exhibits A to L. These ones. A to I. A to I. Okay? Which 4 exhibits are mentioned? So you have to look at these exhibits, and here you are going to write the 4 exhibits that are mentioned. Then you are going to listen it again. Remember that you can rewind it, and write the letter of the correct exhibit, A to I, next to each sentence. Okay? The audio commentary discusses. You read these sentences and you write the correct letter. Ready? Let's listen to it.
Page 112. Exercises 2 and 3. Exhibit 1 is a set of photos of African American car owners from the early to mid-20th century. What all Americans loved about the car was the sense of freedom that it provided, and there was a growing African American middle class in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s, buying cars and going on road trips. However, what happened was that African Americans were subjected to racism on their travels, and some owners of eateries and motels wouldn't accept them as clients. As a result, cross-country traveling was often an uncomfortable experience for black travelers, as they frequently had to prepare boxed lunches and even ended up sleeping in their cars. Despite the hostile reception that African Americans came across, not all business owners were racist. This fact inspired The Green Book, a publication that helped African Americans travel safely across the U.S. Exhibit 2 is one of the many editions of The Green Book. The Green Book was created by New York postal worker Victor H. Green in 1936 to combat the travel problems that African Americans had. What Green did was start a publication that listed all the services and attractions that African Americans could safely visit on outings in New York. It was such a success that he decided to expand it and identify places that welcomed African Americans all over the country. Both black and white businesses advertised in the guide, and African American road trippers shared information with Green and his editors, which was then incorporated in later editions. It was the Esso gas stations that sold the Green Book to travelers, one of the few service station chains that would serve African Americans. Exhibit 3 shows President Lyndon B. Johnson signing the Civil Rights Act on July 2, 1964, at the White House. The bill prohibited discrimination in workplaces, public accommodations, and public facilities, thereby enabling African Americans to travel across the country with the same rights as other Americans. The Civil Rights Act made the Green Book unnecessary, but it wasn't until 1966 that the last edition was published. Victor H. Green had always looked forward to a time when his guide wouldn't be necessary, with equal opportunities having been acquired for everybody. Unfortunately, he died in 1960 and never saw his dream realized. Exhibit 4 shows a couple eating at Ben's Next Door, a restaurant in Washington, D.C. that appeared in the Green Book over 50 years ago. Cities such as Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., Chicago, and New York are now aiming to protect businesses written about in the Green Book because they are part of African American history. However, it was an artist who inspired one of the biggest preservation projects of Green Book businesses. Candace E. Taylor was working on a study of the history of the famous Route 66, a highway that carried thousands of Americans across the country before interstates were introduced in the 1950s. She realized that many of the businesses had appeared in the guide, and now the National Park Service is hoping to preserve some of the buildings and provide a better understanding of the African American experience.
Okay, kids, here you can see you have 9 illustrations. Here you just have the letters of the places that were mentioned, like letter A or things like that. And here you have 8 answers, 8 sentences, but 9 illustrations. So 1 is not needed. Okay, that's all for today. Remember to send me all your works, okay? I love you a lot. Take care and see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.